And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Indiana Hoosiers, your Indiana Hoosiers, go into Ann Arbor and annihilate the Michigan Wolverines. Do not let the final score confuse you, folks. It may say 80-67, which suggests a maybe semi-competitive game that Indiana won by 13 points. Folks, for 30 minutes of this game, it was a full-scale blowout that Indiana was up by 20-plus points for the majority of it. This was a beautiful performance by the Hoosiers in the first half and in the second half, protecting their lead. Some of the best basketball that we've seen Indiana play all year, and given the environment and the opponent being on the road against a good team, I think it's pretty clear that this was Indiana's best performance of the year, and we are going to be right here to break it all down for you on a late episode of the Assembly Call, as this one begins at 11 o'clock Eastern, but an exuberant and enthusiastic one, because, hey, if you have to be up at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 o'clock Central Time, or 2 o'clock Pacific Time, wherever Ryan is, for an episode of the Assembly Call, it might as well be after your team plays beautiful and blows someone out on the road, and that's why we're here. So let's get to it. Let's start breaking this down, and we will open things up, as we always do, with our banner moment and then going around the horn. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit. It's pretty clear that the 28-0 run by Indiana was about as suggestive as anything could be that this team could possibly hang another banner. But I actually want to look at the time before that. What set the stage for that? Because if you go back to the beginning of this game, things didn't start so pretty for Indiana. Not only were we subjected to a few minutes of Kentucky basketball, although it was a loss, so that was nice to see, but Indiana, during that time when no one could watch the game on ESPN, didn't start out very well. And I think it was 8-2 before ESPN caught up with the game as Michigan went on a 10-0 run. And it went to 15-4 as Yogi Ferrell got completely lost on defense. And as Mike Tirico and Dan Dockich pointed out, Tom Crean took a great timeout, excoriated Ferrell for leaving a shooter, which he said in the pregame he did not want to do. But from that point forward, Indiana just went nuts. Yogi was the first one to respond, scoring 4 straight points. Then on the next possession, Nick Zeisloft hit a three-pointer. And then after that, Max Bielfeldt hit a three-pointer. So it was the seniors, Yogi, Nick Zeisloft, and Max Bielfeldt, stepping up and basically letting the younger guys know, hey, this is okay. We got this. We weathered the early storm. Let's get right back into this. And then after they did that, it was the freshmen who stepped up. And not Thomas Bryant, who you might expect, but OG Anunoby and Juwan Morgan. OG had his patented steal and dunk, and then a few possessions later, a great sequence for Juwan Morgan, who stayed aware on defense, ended up forcing a steal that Yogi got, and then ran the floor, got the dish from Yogi, and finished. At that point, it was 24-24, and from there, Indiana exploded, ended up leading 45-24 at the half. And while that is going to get a lot of headlines, the 28-0 run, I thought that segment of play from the seniors and from the freshmen, right, the current leaders of this team and the future leaders of this program, seeing those guys step up like this in a road environment where you're really being tested because you're taking a punch to the face early, they got the game back in order for Indiana, and the Hoosiers coasted from there. It was great to see, and to me, that's the biggest reason why Indiana won the game tonight. So that is my banner moment. And with that said, let's go around the horn and hear everybody else's thoughts. We will start with Andy and your bottoms line on this wonderful Indiana victory. Mr. Bottoms. No audio from Andy. Ryan, we will go over to you for your rant, if there is anything to rant about.
Well, first of all, I guess my only rant could be I apologize if you're watching on the video and you see me blowing my nose or taking medication, because I returned from Bloomington, our big visit to Bloomington this weekend, and brought pneumonia with me. But I had to step on and talk about this game. I think the credit, I really have to go with Tom Crean being my focus for this. I thought that early on the team was not playing well. They were, excuse me, really just lost on both ends of the floor. Maybe it was the atmosphere, coming in. There had been a lot of talk about this being the biggest game of the year, which I agreed with. And Michigan was kind of role, looking to blow somebody out, it seemed like, and really wanted to get a piece of the team, Indiana. And the team really started off slow, and then he, as you said, Yogi left the shooter wide open, and Crean called a timeout and just chewed out that team, chewed out Yogi, and they immediately responded. To their credit, I mean, they played. The defense was this game, and that was the story of this game. That 28-0 run was fueled by defense, and they simplified things offensively as well. They weren't trying to, drive side to side and throw crazy passes. They started focusing on driving to the basket, kicking out, really easy, simple stuff that, when you run simple stuff really well, it can be just as effective as any complicated, drawn-up play. So I think that Coach Crean deserves a lot of credit. Of course, I think he's doing a great job this year. And it's, of course, the year that I started to get really hard on him early on in the season. So maybe I should have taken the hint, gotten really hard on him a couple years ago, and we'd have won a championship by now. But no, I really think that you have to give him credit because they turned it around after he kind of chewed into the team. And they also, another thing is there wasn't a letdown coming out after the half. That was a big concern for me, was that a team like this gets a lead and just gets everything so easily late in that first half because they were dominating and just on a roll. And they could have come out of the second half and just gone flat, and they didn't. They were competitive. Michigan had a few mini runs to get around 20, but, I mean, this game was at arm's length the entire time. They were I think they were up to 27 at one point midway through the second half, so they really kept their foot on the gas, and really the key was defense. And so everything Crean has been preaching about defense, and it seems to be paying off. And this wasn't just a thing where they were playing bad teams. Michigan is a high-scoring offense that had won 4 straight and was 7-2 in conference. And Indiana just blew their doors off on the road. I mean, that is impressive.
It is. You mentioned the defense. I do want to note, Michigan ends up scoring 0.966 points per possession tonight. For the season, they came in averaging 1.17 points per possession. And let it be said that before garbage time, Indiana was holding them to 0.747 points per possession. So it was a terrific effort on defense from Indiana. Andy, let's go back to you. Let's see if we can hear you this time.
All right, let's give this another shot.
Yes.
All right, good. It's funny. The thing I feel like it's pretty good to leave a game like this feeling a little bit salty that the final margin wasn't more, because it's not really reflective of how dominant the performance really was. So, to be certainly not disappointed in a 13-point road win against another good team there's something to be said for that. But I think, from what I caught kind of hopping out and back in, I think, you guys touched on this quite a bit, but we've talked about resiliency of this team over the course of the season, and I thought the way they responded to that run early in the game and getting down was just another example of that. They really didn't seem to panic, and I think that actually seemed to be the difference in the two teams. Once IU got up so much in the second half, I think Tirico even made a point that Michigan's out there trying to score 8 points every time they touch the ball and really force shots and got out of what they wanted to do offensively. And on the flip side, I thought, out of that timeout, Yogi goes to the basket and gets a couple buckets. Even in the second half, when they, settled for some early jumpers, then they took it to the basket again. I just thought they, did a good job of bouncing back, not getting rattled by anything, and really just sticking to the plan and letting things work out. And I thought that was a good, particularly the beginning of the second half, a good thing to see based on how they played, early in the second half of the game on Saturday against Minnesota, where they, didn't really take him out of it, let him hang around, and got away from what they had done to be successful on the offensive end. So I thought just a tremendous all-around performance. I'm sure we'll get to some of the individuals, but I think it's also somewhat telling that we can talk about the freshmen, and OG certainly played one of his better games, but no individual really stands out above the rest. Everybody played well, and I think that's a really good feeling to leave with. And these guys should be proud of how they bounced back from a lackluster performance on Saturday to put up a dominant one tonight.
Yep. All right, and now the man who has the toughest job of any Hoosier tonight, and that's Will DeWitt, trying to come up with a stat of the game for a night when there are so many beautiful stats. What do you got for us, Will?
There are. Can I cheat and just talk about a few on the defensive end just to supplement your guys' conversation here?
Let's hear it.
All right, cool. Well, coming into the game, Michigan, only allowed. Well, okay, we'll start on offense. We'll switch over to defense. I apologize, but all right, Michigan came into the game only allowing opponents to 25.9% of offensive rebounds. That's good for 35th in the country. Tonight, we got 37.8% of our own misses tonight, which led to a ton of second chance points, which obviously helped us extend that lead, especially during that run there towards the end of that half that we talked about earlier. But then on the defensive side of the ball, okay, Michigan came into the game. They were ranked 8th in the country with 3-point shooting with 41.3% made. Well, they only finished with 30.4% tonight. We were, holding them really well on the perimeter. And then here, taking a look at the effective field goal percentage, Michigan came into the game 4th in the country with an effective field goal percent of 58.1. We only held them to 49.2, which I believe it was even lower than that before you said, Jared, the garbage time, where Michigan kind of just got some of those easy baskets. So heck of a performance on the defensive end when you look at all these stats.
Yeah, no, great points. I mean, Michigan's offensive numbers don't look good, and they're way inflated by those final 4 or 5 minutes, which you had to watch the game to see. And let me add one note on the offensive rebounds, which makes it even more impressive to me, is that Indiana only had 5 offensive rebounds in the first half. And they ended with 9 there in the second half, which shows, it was either Ryan or Andy that talked about, the team coming out in the second half and keeping it up, not coming out flat. And so that was beautiful to see. All right.
To be fair, real quick, they couldn't have had many offensive rebounds in the first half because they made so many of their dang shots. Thomas Bryant standing down there like, guys, you're ruining my offensive rebounding stats. Quit hitting shots.
Yes.
Well, that's why he tipped the one to himself about 3 times to pick up some extra rebounds in the second half, so it all just kind of evened itself out.
Yes, it did. All right, so quick reminder to everybody out there. We want you to join our email list because, look, it's 10:12 Central. This show will get over at like 11 o'clock, but there is still an email to write, and you want to get that email because we write them after every game. They're there in your inbox at 6:30 Central Time, the morning after every game, win or lose, and you don't want to miss tomorrow's because it'll be a great way to relive this beautiful performance. You can get on our email list in 2 ways. You can go to assemblycall.com/subscribe, or if you're on a mobile device, maybe you're driving right now, maybe you're listening on the radio, text INDIANA, Indiana, to 44144. You'll get a reply message. Just text your email address back to that message, and you will be on the list, and you will get our email tomorrow. There are over 1,500 IU fans on that list. You want to be on it, so join us on our email list. It is a great way to connect with the show. All right, well, you are listening to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call as tonight Indiana beat Michigan 80 to, we'll say 52 because that seems more reasonable than the actual score of 80 to 67. We'll just make up our own score that is more reflective of the performance. Okay, there are a lot of individuals to discuss. I want to talk about Troy real quick because I thought Troy came out over the first 5 or 6 minutes and was awful. And in fact, Indiana's run, coincided with Troy going to the bench, and he was, a massive -8 for about the first 10, 12 minutes of that first half. And I thought it really culminated with his 4th turnover of the half. I don't remember who threw it to him, but someone threw it to him, and he basically just dropped it out of bounds. He was trying to do too much. He didn't look focused. He had a couple of offensive fouls, wasn't rebounding. I thought from that point on, Troy was terrific and played a lot more like the player that we need him to be against better teams, and especially on the road against better teams. I thought he focused on moving without the ball, running the floor. He let other guys create for him, didn't take any crazy shots. He didn't turn the ball over again. He got some rebounds, and I thought even though he played fewer minutes tonight, and that was in part because of foul trouble, I thought the minutes he played after that initial sequence of bad Troy was terrific, and that's the guy that we need. We have enough guys, who can create and play well with the ball in their hands that we need Troy focusing on what he does best. I thought he really, really did that once he got out of that kind of first segment. So we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Troy and also any other individuals. And Ryan, we'll go to you first because we want to make sure that we get all of your thoughts before you potentially pass out on us mid-show.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting this next half hour. This is the longest I've been upright since Saturday. Anyway, I think that Troy. I think the difference with Troy in the beginning, the early part of the game, and then late in that first half, where Indiana was on that run and he was contributing to it, and some of the second half, was that he was playing off the ball, and Yogi was handling the ball more, and I think and Robert Johnson as well. And I think when you have Troy off the ball, it lets him run around and do the athletic things. It's almost like he's not even involved in the offense. He's just looking for holes in the defense and finding back cuts and and that's when he's at his best. I'm not saying, don't teach Troy the offense and just tell him to run around, but it really doesn't matter. When he has the ball, it really doesn't matter what you're doing offensively, because you feel like eventually Troy's going to hurt you when he's dribbling like that. I mean, he gets the ball at the top of the key, and it's 15 seconds left on the shot clock. I get heart palpitations. My shoulder starts to hurt because I want to have a heart attack. I know it's going to turn out bad. So God, Jared in the chat just said, trying to distract me. No, so I think that when you've got Troy making backdoor cuts, when you've got him cutting through the middle, when you've got him running off screens and things like that, you have a more effective player than when you're trying to get him out on the perimeter driving one-on-one. And so I think they went away from him having the ball in the later stages of the first half. We really didn't see much of that in the second half. And Yogi was handling the ball, and Yogi was the guy who was directing the offense. And Indiana was much more effective. And we've said that for weeks, but it was really evident tonight. And he was dangerous, attacking the rim and just exploiting, using his athleticism to exploit the holes in the defense.
And the guy who came in for Troy and made a big impact right away was OG Anunoby. And he is becoming that guy that you can't really assess his performance from the box score. Like, he had 11 points, 2 assists, 3 boards, a steal, a block. And yet it feels like he was so much more impactful than that, in large part because of the defense that he was playing, especially on Zach Irvin in the first half, where Irvin just couldn't move. And when he did get the ball, OG was there. When he wanted to shoot, there was a hand in his face. And OG just makes some plays on defense and recovers and covers so much ground. It's mind-boggling. I mean, Andy, obviously, Dan Dockich and Mike Tirico talked a lot about OG, but, I mean, we're really running out of good things to say about him. And to me, he's clearly one of Indiana's 5 best players and a guy that needs to be playing at least 20, 25 minutes a night. He only got 19 tonight because he sat during some garbage time, but, I mean, he has become such an important part of this team.
Yeah, it's funny tonight where you could argue that the stat sheet tells maybe a better story than it does other times. He did have 11, which I think is a career high. 3 rebounds, a couple assists, a steal, a block, and no turnovers and no fouls, more importantly. And I think when you look at the fouling and what you mentioned with the defense he played on Irvin, he guarded guys at a number of different positions over the course of the game, and I think that he really stood his ground. He was able to help down low. He would go into the post and try to scrape at the post guy, but he's so long. He was able to get back out and still recover to shooters, and I think he just was really all over the place defensively. His wingspan, we talked a little bit about this when we were there and got to be, down on the court close to these guys in Bloomington on Saturday. I mean, I think it struck all of us that he's just a lot bigger than he might look on TV, and between his wingspan and everything else, I just think he's a really capable defender, and just hustle plays. The play he made in the second half where he kind of tiptoed along the baseline, managed to save a rebound, made a nice spin move back for a bucket, just, and that was all about effort at that point when it would have been really easy for these guys to pack it in and, just kind of go through the motions in the second half. Like, he's still out there fighting and blocking shots and doing all that. So I just a really good game from him. As you said, the steal and dunk is becoming something we've come to expect from him on a regular basis, and really just a great all-around game on both ends of the floor, and really think his energy just changes things when he comes in. And I know, Michael and Josh talked about it a little bit on the postgame show on Saturday about whether, maybe he should be in the starting lineup. And I think it's an interesting, kind of thought exercise to think about what that might mean. But I also love the energy that he brings off the bench. And it seems like, we talked about this earlier in the season when, like Hartman and Robert Johnson would come in and kind of get that bump when those guys came in off the bench. But, that's kind of been replaced a bit by the lift that he and Juwan Morgan are giving this team now.
And Ryan, you wanted to make a point on OG, and since you were the one person who was confident in him producing as a freshman, I think you've earned the right to jump in here.
Well, thank you. I was the originator of the OG Anunoby fan club in like August. But no, the thing I love about the kid is how disciplined he is for how young he is. And one example was, I think it was Irvin, but I'm not sure because there was a lot of switching on the play. But there were a couple points where on the play I'm thinking of, but this happened a couple times where guys would get OG down on the block, drive in and start pump faking. And maybe it's because his arms are just absurdly long or whatever, but he just would stand there. He's not biting on any of your play fakes, and then the guy goes up and he blocks a shot. He's just so disciplined, and he's just so solid all around, and you just don't see that. A lot of freshmen come in and they're either really good offensive players and don't play defense, or they're really athletic and play very good defense but can't shoot, can't do anything on offense, can't handle the ball. He's just a guy that is a complete basketball player who is only getting better day by day, and it seems like it's not like one aspect of his game is getting better and then the offseason they got to work on the other part. He's really seems like his entire game is improving. I mean, the kid's sitting out there hitting threes now. I mean, he's shooting them with confidence. That's not something we expected coming into this year. Even, a guy who was his biggest champion, I didn't expect that this year. But he's just playing well all the way around, and I agree. I do not think he should be starting. I love when he comes off the bench. I get excited because I'm so, especially if the team isn't playing well, he comes in and he just doesn't do anything wrong. And I know that seems like a backhanded compliment, but it's a lot like Colin Hartman when we talk about Colin Hartman things. He just doesn't do anything wrong, and then whatever he adds is just a huge bonus because he's solidifying things, especially on the defensive end, and then you're going to get his hustle and effort and everything. So I love his role right now. I don't think they should change it. I think it's working really well, and do not mess with it. I love the kid, and I've loved watching him and Morgan both develop.
Yeah, Ryan, too. I mean, just looking at some of the stats just to back that up, I mean, he had the highest effective field goal percentage on the team of 91.7. The only one behind him, well, not the only one behind him, but the person behind him is Yogi with a 75. So, I mean, obviously he is, playing pretty well in the offensive end. I mean, he has like a 4.2 assists per 40, a 6.3 rebounds per 40, and a 23.2 points per 40. So, I mean, the kid is just playing, like, amazingly, and I'm kind of on the fence personally. I want to kind of chime in here. I mean, I can see needing the boost from the starting lineup, as the starting lineup had the worst plus minus out of all the groups today. But I can see what Ryan you're saying with that extra boost off the bench. And I just wanted to thank you, OG, for giving me like 7 Twitter followers today. I said you can't say OMG without OG, and then everyone started retweeting it, and I gained like 7 followers. So that might just be the stat of the game now, thinking back about it.
2 quick notes on OG. There was this great 2-possession sequence in the second half where he drove left past Derek Walton and scored, and then on the next possession he got the offensive rebound and then the bucket right after that. And I think Heather summed it up. She's sitting there next to me watching the game. She's like, I really like OG. He's so fun to watch. I hope he stays at Indiana forever. I just thought, you know what? I think all IU fans will agree with that. Although, the better and better he plays, we'll see how long he is a Hoosier. And there was another moment where I was just tweeting OG with an exclamation point, and my Twitter app would not allow me to tweet it because it said it was a duplicate tweet, which it was. And if you watched the game, then you saw why it was. Andy, I want to get some of your thoughts on Tom Crean, and Ryan talked about him a little bit, but I really like to listen to what Crean says in his pregame with Fish and kind of see what the keys are and see if the team goes out and executes that. And today, he talked about playing better in transition, really moving the ball, something he thought we didn't do against Minnesota. Indiana was terrific at it tonight. He talked about not over-helping off of shooters, and after that, where Yogi did, left a shooter, that big timeout, I thought Indiana did a great job of covering shooters, and Will pointed out the stat earlier that the Hoosiers held a great Michigan shooting team to just 30% from downtown, and that wasn't an accident. They forced some tough looks, and the other one was rebounding, and Indiana did a great job on the glass, rebounding 81% of Michigan's misses, so not allowing Michigan to get second chance points and doing a good job on the offensive glass. And so you see a team that goes out and executes a game plan, and then you see a team that responds to its coach inside of the game, as they did after that timeout. And again, this is something that we haven't always seen in the past, but that we're seeing, I think, more and more in Big Ten play here, a team that really seems to be on the same page, not just with each other, but with their coach as well. And look, that's a theme that you need moving forward to win in tough environments. It's a big reason why Indiana won tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought the timeout was. We've all talked many times about why do we wait so long to take timeouts and things like that, and felt like he took one at the right time. I retweeted something about the run they went on afterward, and of course somebody replied back with, and this is just going to make us wonder more why some other times they haven't been taken, but that's kind of water under the bridge at this point. I do think they really seem to respond. They push guys off of the 3-point line. That's one thing that I think you and Alex touched on last week about the 3-point defense and really trying to run guys off the line. And I thought Duncan Robinson was a good example of that tonight. He only ended up hitting 1 of 5 threes. They made him take 6 2-point shots. And for a guy that came in and at various points over the year was shooting well over 50% from 3-point range, just really trying to make them uncomfortable and put the ball on the floor. And Michigan ended up 7 of 23 from the 3-point line. I thought they really did a pretty good job early on, and then for long stretches of the game, Michigan was just chucking threes. But it made them do that. I thought they bodied guys well as they drove to the basket and did a good job of not fouling, or at least not getting called for fouls, which is a stark difference from Tuesday night. Michigan only got to the line 11 times, and it's not something that they do a great deal of, but I think something that we all had a reason to be somewhat concerned about based on how this team had played last week and the fouls called and things like that. So I definitely feel like it was a reset, and it was unfortunate the way they came out to play, but they did respond really well to him. It was a well conceived timeout, and I think the other thing I would say about that is again, right after that they went and really started to attack the basket, got Yogi the ball. He got 2 layups immediately after that, and it was just kind of a everybody calm down. We need to get back to doing what we talked about, and I thought they did a really good job from that point on. And at that point the things get rolling downhill, and guys just had so much confidence taking all those shots in the toward the end of that first half.
By the way, Andy, you are the president of the Robert Johnson fan club, so I feel like you need to be consulted here as Robert scores 16 points. When was the last time on the road against a good team that Robert Johnson led Indiana in shots? I mean, he took 13 shots, made 7 of them, only had 2 turnovers. Didn't have any assists tonight, but I thought still did a pretty good job of moving the ball, making plays within the offense, had 6 boards. I mean, this is probably his best game on the road in a tough environment that we've seen from him. Usually he struggles in situations like this.
Well, I think the one thing to me that's telling, he took most of those threes in the second half, I feel like, but he's 5 of 7 on 2-point shots. I can't recall too many times recently where he's been aggressive to the point of taking that many 2-point shots. So while I don't know that even I, as much of a supporter of him as I am, want to see him leading the team in shots, I think what you do like to see is that the number of shots he got going toward the basket and was much more aggressive. So hopefully that's something that he can build some confidence from and continue as they hit the road here for another few games coming up. But yeah, it was a really solid performance. I think he did a really nice job defensively as well. We'll probably touch on Yogi. But I thought all those guys, we talked about OG, Juwan Morgan came in, did a great job defensively. I thought they, the way these guys are playing, give them some ability to switch a lot of the ball screens that are out top, and really, kind of shook Michigan's rhythm, didn't give a lot of open looks, and I think all those guys deserve a lot of credit for how they played.
Yeah, Andy, you mentioned Yogi, and we're going to talk about him next because we promised that we were not going to take him for granted. This is his senior season. We've got to celebrate these great performances. He was great tonight, so we're going to talk about him in a second. Do want to take a quick second and, number one, thank all of you who have continued to support the show, continue to send in your donations. We really, really appreciate them. They help us out a great deal as we continue to expand our coverage, add new features like the chat, continue to provide more opportunities for our student interns to gain valuable experience like hosting the IU Minnesota show last week. We hope you enjoyed that episode. We certainly know that they enjoyed hosting it. And so if you do want to become a patron of the Assembly Call, if you want to support the show, you can do so at assemblycall.com/support. There are several different options there, whether you want to do a one-time donation, whether you want to do a recurring donation, or whether you simply want to use one of our affiliate links to shop for IU gear that you might have purchased anyway. There's a way for you to do that and for us to get a small commission on it. So you can go to assemblycall.com/support. All of those options are right there, and we greatly appreciate all of your support. It makes a huge difference. So thank you. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris. We are breaking down Indiana's 80 to, what did we say, 56 victory over Michigan. Again, just seems more reasonable than 80 to 67. Let's talk about Yogi. And Ryan, I want to go to you first because I know that you may have to drop off here soon. But Yogi was terrific. And I mentioned in the banner moment, the 4 straight points that he had when it was 15-4 and Tom Crean shoot him out. And him responding like that really seemed to light a fire under the whole team, as the rest of the guys really seemed to follow suit after that. And it was another game where he got back to getting assists, and we've actually seen him struggle a little bit in the assist category since he broke the record. And I don't think that it is a coincidence that Yogi struggling to get assists has hurt the team's offense. And part of that is just guys missing shots. Part of it, I think, is Indiana not, running as much and playing as fast and as up-tempo as Tom Crean wanted, which he mentioned in the pregame. But 17 points, 9 assists for Yogi. Also had 2 steals, a couple of great blocks when guys were driving to the bucket, a couple of rebounds. This was just another vintage Yogi performance. He was 3 of 6 from downtown, and he continues to assert himself not just as one of the best players in the Big Ten, but one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue that at this point. He is one of the best players in the country. I think it's really hard for me to call anybody else the best point guard in the country. Obviously, when you talk about that, you're talking about as a college basketball player. You're not projecting to the next level. I think that he is as good a player as there is, as valuable and as important a player as there is in the country to his team. The key that stood out to me was he played 37 minutes. And he only had 1 turnover, and that's been, an issue for the Hoosiers this year. He had 1 turnover, 9 assists, 2 rebounds, 2 steals, as you said, and 17 points. And it's so funny when he steps to the 3-point line. I was texting with one of my friends who's an IU alum, and he just said, "Is it weird that every time Yogi gets the ball and steps into a 3, and it's not like late in the clock having to force it, I think it's going in?" And I said, "No, it's not weird because I feel the same way. I mean, if he walks into a 3." Or if he takes 2 dribbles and shoots or something like that, or it's a pull-up in transition, it's going in. It's like a layup. And he's really improved in that way over his 4 years. He's just becoming a complete basketball player, and he is going to be an all-time Hoosier great by the time this is over. And tonight was just another example, taking this team on the road to Michigan when things are going poorly, puts it on his shoulders and does something. And that's what separates you from being a really talented player to being a really good player. And he has certainly taken that leadership role on both ends of the floor this year. And, it's been great to see because I think we've questioned that. We all questioned it coming into this year. Did this team have any leaders? And you're seeing Yogi step up and be that guy that we wanted him to be for his first 3 years. And now he is. And he's really leading by example. And along with guys like Max Bielfeldt and Nick Zeisloft, you're seeing actual leadership, and it's amazing what happens on a team when you have leaders guiding your young, talented guys. It's amazing how you can go from being a team of a lot of potential to a team that can actually do some things and make some noise.
Yeah, and speaking of leaders, Andy, let's talk about Colin Hartman and Max Bielfeldt. We know that this was Max Bielfeldt night. He was back in Ann Arbor. And not a great performance from Max, only 5 points, but he had a couple of assists. He led Indiana in rebounds with 7. And, there are a couple of moments late, and these are kind of meaningless moments, but kind of not. You know that Max wants to go in there, score some points, really put on a big performance. And I thought there were a couple times in the second half where he had wide open 3-pointers. And that he wanted to go in there and stick some threes because he never really shot many at Michigan. And he did make the one early, had missed a couple, but those moments in the second half, he passed them up, was patient, and Indiana was able to get good shots because of it. I think Robert Johnson had one cutting to the bucket. There was another one. And it's one of those subtle little signs of leadership where even in a blowout, a guy who has every reason to just go get his and take shots doesn't and thinks about the team first. I loved seeing that. And then Colin Hartman, I thought, really struggled against Minnesota. And I thought Ryan Carrazza of Inside the Hall did a great job in his film session of pointing out several times where Hartman really made poor defensive plays, was out of position, made poor choices. And I thought tonight he was much, much better. Better footwork, was really good denying passes, was in the right spot, and had one of those Colin Hartman type stat lines that he has when he's playing well. 5 points, 3 assists, 4 offensive boards, a steal. Did have the 3 turnovers, but we also saw him. We're seeing him handle the ball more, and I thought he did a good job of kind of running the offense, initiating some offense. So I thought for those two guys, really solid performances from both of them. Anything stand out in the performances of Max Bielfeldt and Colin Hartman to you?
Well, I think Hartman is one. It's funny that I thought Ryan did a really good job with that as well in the film study, and it's odd to see that from Hartman because he was a guy even during last year when the defensive performance was abysmal. That we, consistently referenced he was where he needed to be and really had a good understanding of what they were trying to do, and a lot of other guys didn't. And I thought he got back to some of those things tonight. He's never going to be, a guy who can, he's going to be a guy who's going to struggle against quicker guards and things like that. And I think that was a situation that Minnesota tried to get him in a lot, but I think he did a better job just from taking angles perspective and funneling guys in the direction they needed to go. So I thought he did well. 4 offensive rebounds for him was big. He just seemed really active. I love the anecdote from Dockage during the game that he got a text from Mick Cronin, head coach at Cincinnati, that said, if you know any more guys like Colin Hartman, we need one. I think we're certainly not giving him up, but I think that just speaks to what he does. And they mentioned on there, doesn't make a lot of stat sheet type plays, but makes a lot of smart plays that end up making the team better. I thought he did that in the first half. Got back to more of moving the ball, drove when opportunities were there, but definitely a good bounce back game from him. And Max, I think I noticed. I know exactly which plays you're talking about as well, and I also loved seeing the guys really try to get him involved at times late as well. I think that speaks to some of the chemistry and things like that show up in situations like that where they want to get the guy a basket in that scenario. They know how important the game is, and he just missed a couple and had him rim out, but thought he played well and didn't think he got too caught up in that matchup. I think things certainly are pretty amicable based on what they show between he and the players, and even some of the things that Beilein said about him before the game. It doesn't necessarily feel like a situation filled with animosity between the two sides, but that it meant a lot to him, and seeing him come off the floor I thought was great. And Ryan made a good point in the chat. I thought he stepped in really well. Bryant got those fouls early in the second half, and I thought Bielfeldt stepped in, did a really good job, both defensively and offensively, just kind of moving the ball, making smart plays. So he continues to be a guy. The bench of this team, particularly on the front line, just seems like it keeps getting stronger and stronger. With how he and OG and Juwan Morgan are all playing coming off the bench. I think that front court depth is something that has not been around this program for quite a few years, it feels like. So definitely a positive thing to see. And again, just both guys a steadying influence on this team, even when they're trying to get out and play fast.
Ryan, ever since you came up with the nickname Better Than Advertised Bielfeldt, it's now in your contract that you get to talk about Max whenever he comes up. So since you are being tougher than advertised Phillips tonight, battling through your illness, would you like to speak any words about Max's performance?
Yeah, and that contract reworking that we did was, you had me over a barrel, Morris, and eventually we're going to have to talk about that. But, no, what was a great moment for me was when Bielfeldt came out of the game, the entire bench was congratulating him. Not just a normal, hey, the game's over, nice job, or, you're out for the game, nice job. They were making a point to, pat him on the back, and I think Nick Zeislov pulled him aside about 3 times and said something to him, and, everybody was really happy for him, that he was able to come back to Ann Arbor, and not only they won the game, but that he was able to show well. And that's the thing about Max and for me, guys like Max and Colin Hartman is they're not necessarily going to blow up the stat sheet, but you need those guys. And we've talked about, Jared, you coined the term 2 years ago, the Colin Hartman things, and he just does what you need him to do in any situation. And Max is the same way. He's not there to play 30 minutes a game. He's not going to try and get his points-wise. He's going to come in and he's going to help the team however he can. And I know Michigan told him way ahead of time that they didn't need him and all that stuff, and they had a recruiting plan. But you know what? I saw their front court tonight. They need Max Bielfeldt. I don't care what anyone says. I know Dan Dockage was doing he was trying to say, they'll be fine. They've got this guy and all that. They need Max Bielfeldt right now, and Indiana's very lucky to have him. And he's been a great addition to the team. And you had to feel good for him tonight, going back there and playing well. I don't think he was in a rubbing in their face mood. I don't think his teammates were that way either. And I don't think Michigan felt like they needed to prove anything to him that, oh, we're fine without you. I don't think there was any of that, but you just still feel good for a kid to go back to that place where he had a nice career but not great, and show, hey, I'm an even better player now than I was when I was here, and he certainly is. And again, Indiana's very lucky to have him.
By the way, you want to hear the most ridiculous quote of the night? I was listening to Fish's pregame talk with John Beilein. I kid you not, John Beilein said this. He said, "I'm just dying to get a senior again," and started complaining about how young his roster was and how he needed some experience. And I'm just thinking, dude, you ran off Max Bielfeldt, who has been such a huge benefit. Yeah, I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that.
Max is probably sitting there like, oh, you know where your senior is? He's in Bloomington.
Right here. Right here. Hey, by the way, real quick, can we just talk about Tom Crean's quasi-ownership of John Beilein for a second? I was getting ready into, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I was getting ready to put up a little, SAT analogy type thing, like Bo Ryan is to Tom Crean as Tom Crean is to John Beilein. It's not quite like that, but, I mean, it's pretty good.
I think I saw something that said he was 10-6 against them, going back to when he was at Marquette and even when Beilein was at West Virginia or something like that. So, yeah, he seems to have a pretty good understanding of it. I mean, I think the one thing that plays, I guess, to his advantage is that Michigan in some ways plays a lot like IU in the sense of really trying to spread you out and some of those kinds of things. So maybe it's just a familiarity thing, but certainly seems to be an emerging trend. But I don't think IU doesn't play Michigan again. I think they were only a single play this year, so we'll have to see if that can continue either in the Big Ten tournament or next season.
Did you want to add anything on Yogi, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we continue to it's so easy to look at his stats and all those kinds of things. I just think it continues to be impressive, the numbers that he's putting up game in, game out, and really thought tonight he passed up a couple threes. You mentioned that about Bielfeldt. I thought Yogi did the same thing, passed up a couple of shots that he could have taken and nobody would have thought twice about it, but really did a good job of getting other guys involved. And those couple plays with Troy really caused that momentum to build pretty fast there in quick succession. And the one was a great read and not a lot of room to slip the pass into, and did a really good job. So I think in some of those ways, just you can kind of see him both knowing when the team needs a bucket, which he got those two right out of the timeout, and I think even kind of sensing in some ways when other guys on the team need to get some things going their way, and being able to find Troy on those plays was good. It was actually one of the things that surprised me about being at the game on Saturday. I kept kind of sitting there and waiting for what we'd seen from him over these last few games, when it was like anytime they really needed a bucket to either stop a run from the other team or something else, that he always was coming through. And it was strange to me. He didn't really assert himself as much in those situations until really late in the game on Saturday. So it was nice to see him get back to that in this game. But again, just another great performance and 9 assists. Would have loved to see him get another one to get it to double figures. But just some really pretty passes along the way.
Yeah, and Ryan, you're mentioning in the chat that passage on Morgan, which was just, I'm going to have dreams about that pass tonight.
I mean, that fast break, it was a fast break. I think Morgan might have gotten the rebound on that. I don't remember, but I know Yogi was running up the floor, and Morgan was just ahead of him, sort of hitting the top of the key, and he threw him just a bounce pass between three defenders. But Yogi, the thing is that people could say, oh, that's an irresponsible pass, it's in traffic. All three defenders had their heads turned. And Yogi has amazing court vision. He knew that, because I had somebody say, oh, man, that was lucky. I saw somebody in there say, yeah, it turned out well, but that was a bad pass. No, it wasn't. Nobody was paying attention except for Yogi and Juwan, and that pass went right there. It was an easy layup. Juwan had a great finish. I thought he got fouled on the way up, and he still finished it. But that was just, that's the kind of things that separate Yogi from, Yogi 3 years ago. And that combined with his leadership, things like that, noticing small things like you're driving down the court and nobody's looking, look for your teammates, it was impressive.
You know what else is impressive? Did any of you guys think that we'd be on here talking about a 13/28 point IU victory over Michigan, and we'd be 45 minutes into the show, and I don't think we've mentioned Thomas Bryant's name once? And it's not because Thomas played poorly. I mean, he had 7 points, 6 boards, a couple offensive rebounds. You know, he's 3 for 5 from the field, but he had some foul trouble. And this wasn't a game particularly well suited for him. But I mean, that's incredible that the guy who really carried Indiana in the Minnesota game. I really thought he was going to need to play big for Indiana tonight, and he played well. But so many other guys stepped up, it wasn't needed. So, just a great performance from Indiana. And what's really big about this, we talked about this before the Minnesota game. Indiana entered that Minnesota game at, what were they? They were 7-1 in the conference. And you looked at those next 3 games against Minnesota, Michigan, and Penn State, with that game at home against Iowa looming on the 11th. And you knew Indiana had to go at least 2-3 in that 3-game stretch. You assumed a home win over Minnesota, and then you thought, okay, Indiana's got to go win one of those on the road. Probably Penn State, but if you can steal one against Michigan, that'd be great. And now Indiana sits at 2-0 in that stretch, 9-1 overall, and they head on the road to Penn State. And look, if you are looking past the Penn State game to Iowa, then you probably haven't been an IU fan that long, or you've forgotten your recent history, because Penn State has been the scene, really both at Penn State and even at home, of some bad recent Indiana performances, where either we've eked out an ugly win on the road or just collapsed in an ugly loss at home. And so this is not a game I'm looking past. Pat Chambers has a team that always plays tough and plays above their talent. They're not a very talented team. They're 148th in KenPom. Andy, do you want to give us just a quick look at Penn State? We don't need to go into it too much, but what kind of challenge is awaiting Indiana? And I assume that you, like me, are not overlooking this game at all.
No, I mean, when one of the best IU teams that I've ever seen, albeit many years ago at this point, I almost went in there and lost. That still haunts me at this point. So yeah, I mean, Penn State, they're 2-7 in the Big Ten right now. They go to Iowa tomorrow night, so I have to think they end up 2-8. Pomeroy gives them a 4% chance to win that game, so I'm gonna side with the 96% of that, and so they end up 2-8. Really outside of the top 10 in conference play, in both offensive and defensive efficiency, and the only thing they've really done well, at least in league play, is get to the free throw line, and IU did a pretty good job of not putting Michigan on the line a lot tonight. Although to be fair, that happens a fair amount with Michigan just based on the number of threes that they take. So that's one thing to watch. They've got 3 guys who are averaging in double figures, and Brandon Taylor, who feels like he's been there forever, Shep Garner, and Peyton Banks. So those are 3 guys. They're all 6'6" or smaller. Taylor will be an interesting defensive assignment for these guys. You would have to think, maybe a Robert Johnson gets him. I think OG will certainly be on him at some point during the game. So I think if they can slow him down, he uses a ton of their possessions, takes a lot of shots, draws a lot of fouls. It'll be kind of a case where if they can keep him and Garner in particular in check, I think they should be in pretty good shape. So Penn State's really struggled shooting the ball from pretty much everywhere, particularly from 3-point range. So that's something to watch, because IU's played really well, and defensive efficiency-wise, they're 13th out of 14 teams in the league so far on defense. So you have to think that this is another game that if IU plays well, takes care of the ball, they're certainly going to be able to score on, and I struggle to think that Penn State's going to have the firepower to keep up with them.
Another great stat, by the way, Kentucky lost tonight to Tennessee, blowing a 21-point lead on the road. Indiana, of course, went on the road, led by 21 at halftime, protected it, got the win. It's always nice when that happens. Real quick,
Indiana did it against a good Michigan team.
Yes.
Kentucky lost to a very bad Tennessee team.
Yes. Excellent point, Ryan.
And I tell you, it's funny because while we were sitting here finishing, I'm watching, I watched Providence lose at DePaul, who's terrible, and you see, I mean, in this college basketball season, every week it feels like you've got a couple of these head-scratching losses where you're like, I have no idea how this team who's in the top 20 or whatever went on the road to this team who's in the bottom dweller in their league and lost. And so while it's easy to kind of nitpick and say that some of IU's success so far in the Big Ten has been based on who they played, there are plenty of teams who have lost games like the ones that were on IU's schedule. This team, even sitting tonight's impressive performance aside against a good team, again, it goes back to the Penn State game. You can't take anything for granted because you don't have to look too far to find games when good teams have lost to far inferior teams on the road.
That's right. Take that, Crimson Cast. Just kidding. They had a great episode earlier today, but I don't think they were expecting a big blowout like this. That's right. I was going to have one final reminder here to get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text 44144. No, text Indiana to 44144, INDIANA to 44144. You can get on the list because while the show is only going to go for about 5 or 10 more minutes, our work has just begun. Andy's going to do his analysis. Will's going to write up his stat of the night. I'm going to write the email, and that thing will be sitting there at 6:30 Central Time tomorrow morning. We don't care how late it is. We just love our Hoosiers, and we want you to get on the list so that you can get those emails as well. All right, it's time to wrap things up here on another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris, here with Andy Bottoms, Will DeWitt, and still Ryan Phillips, who is fighting through and still hanging out with us. And it is that time to go through our picks. By the way, there is an email chain proving this. We all made our picks before tonight's game. 3 of us went with Indiana. 1 of us went with the Wolverines. We won't say who that is, but Will has his head in his hands right now because he did that. So that's what happens, Will, when you go against the Hoosiers. That is what happens. So let's go and get our picks for this game. I'm pretty sure the only reason that Ryan is still here is so that we don't stick him with the Penn State pick after the Rutgers debacle. So, Ryan, would you like to make your pick?
I learned that lesson, and I still protest that because I emailed you saying Indiana would beat Rutgers. So I'm still in first place as far as I'm concerned because I'm the only one who picked the Wisconsin loss. I shouldn't be bragging about that, but I think that the thing we have to remember about this weekend is complete trap game on the road, a house of horrors for IU in the past. Luckily, it's a night game. It's not one of those afternoon starts on the road, which are always ugly. I think Indiana. There's some trap game feel to it because it's that showdown with Iowa is really looming now. But I think that Indiana gets by Penn State. It may not be pretty. It may look kind of like the Minnesota game where it's a lot closer than it should be. But I still think Indiana pulls that one out easily. In the end, I think they pull away even more than they did against Minnesota.
Mr. Bottoms.
Yeah, I'll definitely go with IU. I think there is a little bit of that look ahead potential, but the one thing that I kind of like is that Iowa game is not till Thursday, so there's a little bit of a gap between games, not only just from a rest perspective, but it's not one that is looming immediately after. So I think that helps a little bit with that aspect of things. And again, I think just based on the way this team has kind of continued to show up and play well against some of these inferior teams on the road, I think they should do the same thing. They should be ready to go and get a little bit of extra rest from playing so early this week, and they'll have a few extra days there. So I think that'll help with some of the guys I know talked about being banged up a little bit. So if they get a little extra rest, they'll be ready to go in Happy Valley.
And Will, would you like to make amends for your terrible, no good, awful mistake from earlier today?
Yeah, no, that was terrible, no good, and awful. You're right. I'm going to go Indiana. Lesson is learned. Actually, on Friday, I'm supposed to get my wisdom teeth taken out. I'm going to maybe ask for a second x-ray to make sure I even have wisdom teeth because I don't know what person with wisdom makes that pick because that was just – I'm just muting myself because I should.
All right. No, you redeemed yourself. The wisdom teeth joke was funny. That was solid, Will. I'm terrified of that game Saturday. I'm just going to come out and say it. It terrifies me. It's a trap game. It's a tough place to play. It's a team that is going to play tough. If they have a good shooting night, they can really compete with Indiana. And if this were 2014 or 2015, I would be picking Penn State. However, it is not. This is 2016 with our 9-1 Indiana Hoosiers. And what I love about this team, again, and Andy, I thought you made a great point. You can poo-poo the schedule and talk about who has Indiana played? What have they done? Well, Indiana's played 10 Big Ten games, and they've won 9 of them. And 5 of those games have been on the road. And, yes, they lost the game to Wisconsin on the road by 3 points. But, they've gone into Nebraska and won. They beat Rutgers on the road. They went into the barn and won. They went in tonight to Michigan and demolished them on the road. And so I'm really starting to develop confidence in this team's ability to avoid the ugly toe stub loss. Because, frankly, the way they played against Minnesota, they probably should have lost that game. but they found a way to win. And that's the mark of a good team, is when you don't have your A game or maybe even your B game, can you still go get a victory? And Indiana's proving that. And I've got this feeling that Indiana's going to have a B performance on Saturday against Penn State, after this great performance tonight and with Iowa looming. But I think they can win with their B performance now, and I don't think that was the case the past 2 seasons. And that, to me, is the mark of a good team, because you're going to have some B performances through an 18-game Big Ten schedule, but it's nice to be able to trust that your team can still win when they do. So I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping Indiana plays great, but I'm definitely picking the Hoosiers up there against Penn State. It terrifies me. I'm scared. I'll be nervous all game, but I do think that this team has earned our confidence to believe that they will go in there and get the win. All right, it is time for last call. God, this is one of those shows that I wish it wouldn't end. I want to talk about this game just all night long because it was so much fun. But it does need to end. Let's go to Ryan first for his last call.
Yeah, I just want Hoosier fans to sort of pause and look at the Big Ten standings. And Indiana is 19-4 and 9-1 in conference in the first week of February. And on top of that, their only loss was on the road at Wisconsin, where we never win. And that one was in overtime, and Wisconsin got a ton of help from the officials. So they should probably be undefeated right now in conference, but let's not talk about that.
You should have mentioned that on the Wisconsin show in hindsight.
Yeah. So, yeah, I really should have. That never came up, and I'm amazed. Especially against Wisconsin. You figure I would have talked about that. But I just think this team is surprising us every week. I think Tom Crean has really grown as a coach this year. I think Yogi has grown as a player and as a leader. I think that you're seeing guys like the young guys, as Jared mentioned earlier, the seniors are really stepping up. The young guys are really stepping up. Guys like OG Anunoby, Thomas Bryant, and Juwan Morgan are as big a key to this team as the seniors. And you're just seeing guys, I mean, in that 28-0 run tonight, you just saw guys having fun. I mean, they really were having fun and just looking like it was really a joy for them to be on the floor together and playing well together. And, they were also feeding off of each other. It wasn't just like, okay, now it's my turn. Nope, now, okay, you can have it, but I want to get it back. They were just having fun and feeding off each other. It's been a long time since we've seen that. It feels that way anyway. A long time since we've seen that. Consistently game to game from an Indiana team, and we've seen that several times this year. In the last couple of weeks, you're really seeing a different team.
One reason why I love doing the assembly call is, look, you have these big victories. This is why we started the show, so we could just extend the joy of wins, commiserate together with losses. But over in the chat, and you can get to the chat, assemblycall.com/live, Candy Stripes is in there just having a conversation with himself right now, going crazy with puns. We're going to have a B performance, all right, a Bielfeldt performance. It's official. Wisconsin got a lot of help in Madison. Candy Stripes, it might be time for bed. Will, let's go over to you. If your self-imposed exile is over, it's time for your last call.
Yeah, you know what? 10 points, guys. We are only 10 points away of a 22-1 record. That's something to, just to note, because looking at the last few games, I mean, the Wisconsin loss hurt. Minnesota, Jared, you said it, they played probably not well enough to win, but somehow they still found a way to win. And then today, the start of the game did not go the way that, they wanted. But something changed. I really hope that this is going to be a turning point that's just going to show them what they can do. I really hope that they realize, enough's enough. It's time to go out there. It's time to play. It's time to have fun. I think if they kind of take OG's example and kind of play like OG, if they could just channel their inner OG, they'll make us say OMG, because I'm serious. I really think that they are gonna, just interchannel that, and I'm excited. And even though you said don't look ahead to Iowa, I'm gonna hold you to that. But we'll hold on here for Saturday, which I will try my best to make that show, even though I'm gonna be down a few teeth. So I'm gonna power through.
Hey, we just keep raising the bar. Ryan's here with pneumonia. You're going to be here after wisdom teeth. Andy, what are we going to do to show our dedication?
Hopefully not sustain any major injuries or surgeries. So I'm just going to keep showing up in spite of anything else. I don't know. It's like I said, I think just a really impressive win from this team. Everybody's just waiting. We've all circled this game for a while, and everybody's been waiting to see, like, is this run really for real? How good is this team? And while I don't think all those questions are answered in this game, I tweeted out a few things about the schedule and the remaining games based on how they stack up from an RPI or a Pomeroy standpoint. And I kind of ended it with, one way or another, we're going to find out a lot about this team over the last half of the Big Ten season. And I think, this was 11% of the rest of the Big Ten season, and it's hard not to walk away impressed. So there's certainly some games left to play that are going to be extremely difficult, more so than even the game tonight. But really continue to be impressed with the resiliency of this team, both as the season has gone on and in-game situations. As I mentioned before, I think it would have been really easy to kind of bury their head in the way this game started, and you kind of saw Michigan do that even at home in an environment where people are trying to pick them up and really push them over the hump. They were hanging their heads and just waiting for the next shot to drop there toward the end of the half, and I thought it was really impressive that IU didn't do that. Responded really well to the timeout and got back to what they needed to do, and I think a good start to this crucial stretch for everybody. And again, it's another winnable game on Saturday. They need to take care of business, and then we'll worry about Iowa after that. But a really impressive performance against a Michigan team that was playing really well, some of its best basketball of the season coming into this game.
Hey, Ryan, would you be willing to confirm Twitter reports that all of Jim Harbaugh's commitments decommitted after the 28-0 IU run?
I thought that was pretty funny. I got to admit, that was a good line.
Look, I'm afraid we might have buried the lead tonight because we've talked about a lot of numbers, but there's one really important one that we haven't talked about, I don't think, and that's turnovers. Like I said, Indiana started out with 5 turnovers, I think, in the first few minutes. They finished with 12, but that is good for a percentage of only 17.9%. Coming into this game in their Big Ten road games, the 4 Big Ten road games, Indiana was turning it over on 23.8% of its possessions. If that were their season-long average, it would be 348th in the country out of 351. They've been that bad turning the ball over. Now, they still won 3 of those games, but as we remember, they pretty much lost that Wisconsin game in addition to everything Ryan ranted about because they turned it over 3 more times in a game they lost by 3 while scoring 1.05 points per possession. You can do the math and see how that cost them the win. Well, in 5 home games, Indiana has been turning it over only 18.6% of the time, which is about average. And if you take a team that is as elite as Indiana is in shooting, and Indiana is elite in effective field goal percentage, 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, and offensive rebounds, and if you just turn it over at an average rate, you have a great to elite offense. Well, tonight, for the first time on the road against a good team, Indiana did a good job with turnovers, and they really rebounded from those early turnovers to finish with just 17.9%, which is better than average, and certainly better than what they've done this year. And it's no coincidence that on a night when they fix some of the turnover issues, they go out and have one of their better performances of the season. And I think that is such a big key, such a big part of the formula for this team moving forward is to protect the ball, protect possessions, because when Indiana does that and they allow their offensive rebounding and their shooting and their ball movement to take over, they can do what they did tonight. And when you combine that with the kind of attention to detail on defense, the kind of rim protection, and the way that they guarded dribblers and kept dribblers out of the lane, I mean, look, what this Indiana team showed us tonight, and this goes back to what I wrote a couple games ago after Indiana's last blowout victory, is this team is becoming what we thought it would be at the start of the year. And expectations got a little bit shifted around after the poor performance in Maui and the awful performance at Duke. But what these past, however many games it's been now, 13, 14, 15 games have done, is remind us of exactly why we thought this was a team with Elite Eight Final Four potential before the season, and why this was a team that could compete for the Big Ten title. And so we're all very excited that Indiana has rebounded from its early season struggles, and this team continues to give us reason to believe that everything we thought it was capable of before the season, it is capable of, if not more, because this team is one Yogi Ferrell shot at the end of regulation against Wisconsin away from being 10-0 in the conference. And you can say what you want about the schedule, but they are 9-1. It is not a cheap 9-1 because, Andy, as you alluded to, as Dan Dockich talked about on the broadcast, it's not who you play, it's how you play. And this Indiana team, for most of Big Ten play, has been absolutely terrific. They were terrific tonight. They need to go up and be terrific on Saturday against Penn State, and then do it again against Iowa. And Look, this was just another reason why we should all be confident and excited moving forward in Big Ten play. The schedule is about to get tougher, but this Indiana team is ready for it, and I'm excited to watch what they do. Thank you all very much for watching live. I can already tell we had one of our biggest turnouts. It is great to see so many of you here and to see you here live for a late game. That is wonderful. We love all of you live listeners. You are such a big part of our core audience. If you're listening on the podcast, we appreciate you too. And if you're listening live on the Sports Buzz in Louisville, we greatly appreciate you guys. We love everybody in the audience, and we're so glad that we got to meet many of you in Bloomington this past weekend. That was a wonderful experience that we hope to do again next year and maybe even make that a yearly experience in Bloomington. But with that said, it is time to close up for the night. We still have plenty of work to do, but a wonderful, wonderful night of Indiana basketball. The Hoosiers win 80-67, and we will talk to you on Saturday after Indiana Penn State. Have a great night, everybody. Oh, Andy, did you want to jump in real quick?
I did if I would turn my microphone on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just one quick thing. I know Mike Miller, who we got to meet while we were there at the Herald Times, lost his stepfather. He tweeted something out about that today, so he wasn't covering the game. So just want to kind of give our thoughts to him. He's been, supportive of us, and hope all is well with he and his family in a difficult time. So just wanted to chime in with that there at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Best wishes, Mike. All right, everybody. We will talk to you on Saturday after IU Penn State.